July 100.
Take us a, lead us a.
Come on.
I call St. Lucie Transportation Planning Organization regular meeting on Wednesday, February 6, 2013 at 2 p.m. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
May we do the Pledge of Allegiance?
You want the public?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
City of Port St. Lucie, Councilman Bowen.
Here, ma'am.
St. Lucie School Board Representative Hensley.
Present.
City of Fort Pierce Mayor Hudson.
Present.
St. Lucie County Commissioner Lewis.
Here.
City of Port St. Lucie Councilwoman Martin.
Here, ma'am.
St. Lucie County Commissioner Mowry.
Here, ma'am.
City of Fort Pierce Commissioner Sessions.
Present.
St. Lucie TPO Vice Chair Hutchinson.
Here.
And St. Lucie TPO Chair Fiala.
Here, ma'am.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. I need a motion for approval of agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
I need approval of minutes of December 5th, 2012, regular meeting.
Motion to approve December 5th, 2012 regular meeting.
Second.
I have a second. All in favor?
Madam Mayor, under discussion, please. Madam Chair, page 14 of the minutes, please. You can flip it over. First paragraph. Mr. Buckwald also thanked the TPO staff, including Operations Administrator Ron Bowen, who personally spent extra time to assemble the chairs. Either I have a clone or it's an inaccuracy, so I just wanted to correct the minutes on that.
Thank you, Councilman Bowen. That is Bowman, B-O-W-M-A-N, and we'll make the revision.
Okay, very good. Thank you. It kind of caught me by surprise, sir.
Thank you.
Comments from the public. Do we have any comments? Seeing none, I'll move forward. Comments from the advisory committee members? Any comments? See none. Going into item 8, action items. Item 8A, St. Lucie Martin Waterways Plan.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. Task 5.1 of the Unified Planning Work Program includes the development of a St. Lucie Martin Waterways Plan to enhance intercoastal waterway planning. The Waterways Plan will be developed in cooperation with the Martin Metropolitan Planning Organization and will identify and prioritize the waterway access needs and facilities of the waterway transportation system. The plan may be utilized to promote and maximize the economic vitality and the public benefit of the waterway. The Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council has prepared a scope of services that is before you for consideration for the development of such a plan. The Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council prepared a similar plan for Palm Beach County. And here from the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council to present the scope of services is Kim Delaney. Kim?
Thanks. For the record, Kim Delaney from Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, and thanks for the opportunity to address you this morning. In working with your staff, as Mr. Buckwald has mentioned, we have worked through a scope and a project approach to develop a two-county regional waterways plan for Martin and St. Lucie counties. And we had the good fortune of working with the Palm Beach MPO fairly recently, actually, and developed the first plan of this type, really, that exists in the state. And so I had for you just a brief overview to give you kind of a context of what this type of planning effort might entail, and take your feedback today as well, so that we can approach the project really with the broadest perspective, making sure we cover all the components that we need to think about going into the effort, and be able to accomplish a plan that will serve the needs of Martin and St. Lucie counties. And so with that, of course, as Mr. Buckwald mentioned, this type of planning effort is already identified in your Unified Planning Work Program, and similarly, it's already in the Martin MPO UPWP as well. The recent example to walk through with you just briefly is some work we did in Palm Beach County, where the Palm Beach MPO, along with a number of different organizations in Palm Beach County, the League of Cities, Palm Beach County, and its various departments, environmental and economic development, the Economic Council, the Business Development Board, and FIND, all participated together to help guide a planning effort which developed a waterway plan for Palm Beach County. In Palm Beach County, the Intracoastal Waterway covers about 43 miles. It's a pretty extensive defining feature, if you will, in Palm Beach County. And it touches 27 municipalities, which really makes for some complexities when it comes to regulations along the waterway. And so we were asked by, again, the Palm Beach MPO and various partners to address three main themes going into the planning effort, and they were land use, transportation, and economic development. What we heard from all of the agencies and municipalities and the public was a broader list of things. In addition to those three important factors, land use, transportation, and economic development, the community and the participants in that effort also wanted to talk a lot about public access, because that was a main priority, as it turned out, that hadn't really been addressed as directly, as well as, of course, natural systems and ecotourism and recreational features related to the Intracoastal. And so the plan that was ultimately developed over about a 2-year time frame in Palm Beach County touches on all 6 of these as kind of the organizing principles, if you will, for their planning effort. I have just a moment or two on each. The first, expanding public access, really was the loudest message that we heard when we went out to the public. What you find in a place like Palm Beach County is that, in their instance, they had about 1.2 million people at the time with 38,000 registered boats. So most of the residents weren't getting on the water in the vessel they owned anyway, but they were paying taxes to help maintain the waterway, and it was one of the features that really helped define Palm Beach County as the type of place where they wanted to be. So not only did the plan address boaters of all different shapes and sizes, everything from freight traffic down to kayaks, but it also looked at the non-boating community and tried to identify improvements and access points to help expand the benefit of the Intracoastal to those other users. In addition, natural systems was a high priority identified in the county, and similar to the St. Lucie River and the Indian River Lagoon estuary up in Martin and St. Lucie counties, down in Palm Beach County it happens to be the Lake Worth Lagoon. The plan did not try to replace certainly any of the ongoing restoration efforts, but instead what it tried to do was create more efficiencies. If there were already ongoing restoration efforts, for example, to improve and strengthen spoil islands, if you will, and the benefit they can provide in the Intracoastal, the plan instead looked to ways to expand access to those islands so that they could become a better feature and not provide just the environmental benefit of having extra habitat, but actually having a destination for kayakers, for example, in a particular point, worked out with the environmental agencies. Recreational opportunities and ecotourism was another main theme in their planning effort, and what was acknowledged is that the county had developed in a fashion so that the southern part of the county really was without much in the way of public access anymore along the Intracoastal Waterway. There were just a few points where there were recreational spots, but the rest, for the most part, was really developed in a fashion that didn't leave any access. Ecotourism became a very high point of discussion in their planning effort, and I don't know that we'll hear that in Martin and St. Lucie as well, but we've heard from some of the advisory committees so far that that's a point that's of great interest. So, for example, in down to the south of you, there were just a few opportunities left that hadn't been really identified and improved in a way to expand ecotourism opportunity. In Lake Worth, one of those examples was identified, Jewel Cove, a project that developed, which is illustrated to the upper left. And then we identified all the kayak launch points, access points, sandy shorelines, where folks could put in a kayak, and actually developed a mapping for the county to utilize going forward to expand access to the waterway in that mode. Water-based transportation, as you might imagine, from an MPO planning process was a very high priority, and we certainly anticipate spending a lot of time in water-based transportation in the planning effort in Martin and St. Lucie counties. Water taxis and ferries were identified going into the effort as an issue of high interest and priority. In this instance, we actually identified all the providers in the county, found their launch points, tried to commonalize their schedules and ways to access them, because what you found was that it was very hard to identify where the water taxis were because they operated on an ad hoc basis without a lot of organization. This has become a cottage industry for Palm Beach County, and the Tourist Development Council has picked it up and is now carrying it forward as a better organized effort, which really expands the economic benefits that come from that type of system. We actually were asked to identify all the various water taxi stops along the Intracoastal and integrate those with land use planning activities that were already underway. On this map, those circles along the shore illustrate various marina village efforts that were either underway when the planning effort was started or identified during the course of developing the plan, so that we could find a way to integrate those land use destinations with other modes of transportation. We actually integrated them not just with the water taxi service, but also found ways to connect them with upland transportation, so that again we could maximize access to the intracoastal, document how that could take place, and provide those strategies for the local governments to decide whether or not they wanted to implement those mechanisms going forward. Marina villages and destinations was how we defined the land use component. That was the priority that we heard from the community. At the time the planning effort was begun, there were actually 5 marina village projects underway. 3 more were identified during the course of the plan. What this helped illustrate with the economic analysis that accompanied it was the need for different types of destinations to remain differentiated from one another. So it's not 8 of the same type of destination, for example, in Palm Beach County's example, but instead they vary. The town of Jupiter is very different from a waterfront destination we identified during the plan in Palm Beach Gardens. The scale and the type of market that's drawn from those different destinations actually makes each of them more successful unto themselves. Riviera Beach, again, differentiated from West Palm Beach. Riviera Beach is a working waterfront with active marina uses, very different from, for example, West Palm Beach, which has a very grand commons and has things like the boat show and Sunfest. It's a very different type of market. What the economists help us understand was the need for those types of destinations to remain different and actually really maximize those differences and plan accordingly. Lake Worth, a location we identified during the course of the charrette process, actually the only location left in Palm Beach County where the 4 corners, identified on the bottom left of the slide, remain in public ownership. There's almost no public ownership in all of southern Palm Beach County except for this location. So we were able, through the planning process, to identify it, identify some improvements there. The city has since picked this up and is carrying it forward as a point of implementation. Very different from, for example, the town of Lantana, which lies to the south, that has public infrastructure on the water but had no public water taxi type destination identified there. And finally, further to the south, much more intense development, appropriate in those locations, Boynton Beach being very different in its very intense, heavy residential development that's now taking place there, versus a place like Delray Beach, which is a much smaller scale and kind of a cultural destination along the waterway. So again, through the planning process, we're able to identify these various land-based activities that had either existing plans or plan developed through the process and understand the economics associated with each to help inform future land use decisions going forward. Sustainable economics, a driving factor with respect to Palm Beach County's plan as well and what's anticipated for St. Lucie and Martin counties. We actually identified the various industry sectors associated with the waterways. They're noted on this slide: marine industries, hospitality, workplace employment, resident and visitor services, which is really retail clusters, and recreation. Each of them was analyzed, all of the jobs associated with them were calculated, and we were able to identify missing infrastructure and workforce training opportunities to help each of these sectors grow. Each of the industries was mapped, their area of influence was identified, and ways to integrate them to help them grow as an industry cluster were identified during the planning process, and they're being implemented by Palm Beach County's Economic Development Division. So with that, really as a matter of context, those are the kinds of things that might be appropriate in a planning effort like this one. At least it's a model that we have to use to help make us more efficient, hopefully, going forward with a broad perspective. In Martin and St. Lucie counties, when you illustrate the waterways, certainly it's well beyond just the intracoastal, because we have the North Fork and the South Fork and the St. Lucie Canal all the way out to Lake Okeechobee to consider as part of the planning effort. If the types of themes that were raised in Palm Beach County have any bearing in Martin and St. Lucie counties, we would want to begin with, at a minimum, these types of themes that are illustrated on this slide: natural resources, economic opportunity. Certainly the port of Fort Pierce is its own economic engine, and the infrastructure necessary to help it achieve a higher economic yield. Environmental systems, transportation both on the water and off the water and getting to the waterways. The land use patterns, there are a number of ongoing redevelopment and local land use planning efforts that capitalize on the waterway, so the better a job we can do of understanding those and kind of pulling out of them key infrastructure that makes them more successful. Parks and recreational facilities, and then of course public access, which again it wasn't identified going into the effort to the south, but it certainly became a very strong point going forward. So we would suggest these are perhaps the types of themes that would make sense to at least begin with as we go out to get more input. procedurally, we've had an opportunity now to present to the advisory committees in Martin and St. Lucie as well, and have gotten good feedback from the advisory boards and actually expanded the scope as a result. We also had a chance to go down to the Find board. What we learned is that Find was so happy with the planning effort that took place in Palm Beach County, they actually amended their own rules to allow funding to be secured by other counties to do this type of planning effort. What Find saw this effort as a means to really improve efficiency, to better understand how Find investments kind of correlated to other things going on, so they weren't standalone improvements. And so, given that, Find made funding available for other planning efforts like this one. Martin County went ahead and with your staff presented to the Find board this concept back in October. Find has already provided funding for this effort going forward, and so they would be participating in the effort going forward. We had an opportunity to present to your 3 advisory committees in the last few weeks, and they were all very supportive of the planning effort, which brings us to your board today. With endorsement from your board going forward, we're scheduled to present to the Martin MPO in the next couple of weeks. Then we'd be able to begin the process, we would hope, by the month of February. In terms of schedule, we think this would be about an 18-month process. That would give us a chance, if we can really kick off the project in March, hold a series of educational sessions with all of the affected agencies and the public over about a 6-month time frame. There's a lot of activity underway already on the waterways. It's just not integrated, and that's what this kind of planning effort allows you to do, is kind of zoom out to 20,000 feet and understand what the different cities are doing, how the regulations are changing, what the activities the port is undertaking, the different institutionals along the waterway, and really draw the commonalities out of that. We would suggest, if we're able to accomplish that in about a 6-month time frame, there could be an open public process around the fall or so. We would suggest, because the scale is so big, we'd probably want to conduct 2 sessions, one in Martin and one in St. Lucie County, for the broadest public input, and then be able to synthesize all of the input that we receive into a plan that we could bring back to your board by the end of the year. And we'd be happy to answer questions about schedule or project approach if you'd like. We have also discussed with your staff a concept where the steering committee that would be established for the project would be appointed by your board as well as the Martin MPO, so that we have a steering committee that really is broad-based in helping guide the project going forward. Okay?
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
I just have 2 comments, and maybe you can help clarify for me. When you mentioned a while ago about doing the public outreach in the 2 meetings, and one in Martin and one in St. Lucie County, I would like to recommend that you consider looking at doing actually 2 in St. Lucie County, because Fort Pierce's waterways are very unique, as is Port St. Lucie's waterways.
Okay.
So you're going to have 2 totally different views and background of input coming into play if you were to do it
Absolutely.
that way.
Sure. Okay, that's a good suggestion.
And then my other question was, and maybe I haven't been able to find it in here, I keep going back and forth all over here, but one of the, it's actually 2 things. One of them is, I'm not seeing if there's any identification or if you're even going into that way of where there's issues of shoaling involved, which seems to be, at least in St. Lucie County, that's a lot of our issues on using the boat transportation, especially if you're within the river. If that's going to be looked at. And then the second thing would be, St. Lucie County is currently undergoing their port master plan, and a lot of what you've got in here as being part of your scope of work is actually being done with DOT, so I would just suggest that you coordinate with them as we're doing our master plan.
Absolutely. And on the shoaling issue, as a matter of fact, Mr. Buchwald raised it specifically to make sure we addressed bathymetry and the geometry of the waterway,
Okay.
looking specifically at shoaling, and so yes, that's certainly
It is specifically-
incorporated.
okay.
And with respect to the port master plan, what we would suggest is all of the efforts the Port Master Plan is undertaking would be rolled into this process. We wouldn't want to duplicate anything the port is doing. And it's such an enormous undertaking, it could actually really distract the larger effort. And so we would suggest that we need to be cautious and appropriate in how we integrate those pieces so that we don't lose sight of all the other components of the waterway.
I agree with you
On the
on
plans
that one,
going
and my
forward.
point for bringing it up, though, was a lot of your scope of work, analysis of needs related to specific vessel classes, including mega yachts and so forth. That's already being done within the Port Master Plan. So don't duplicate the work is all I'm asking. If they've got
Absolutely.
that information current, then you just need to pull from that.
Yes, we'd be sure to do that.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
No.
Oh, sorry.
I was actually going to piggyback on that, and I reviewed the scope and was thinking about what's going on with the 750 plan, the amount of analysis that they're doing. They just provided their update 2 weeks ago, and talking about they're already looking at a lot of the similar aspects, and so I was seeing some real duplicative efforts, and that confused me a little bit. I wasn't sure how some of that was going to really blend and gel together. And then looking at the fee, I mean, $200,000, that's a substantial fee for this kind of a study, and I've loved the work that's come out, but the fee seemed rather high for me compared to the work that was going to be provided on this, and I don't know what discussions may have gone back and forth on that, but it seemed like quite a bit of money that was going to be spent on something that really is already being done a little bit with the Port Master Plan as well as what's being done with the 750 plan, thinking that maybe in many respects the pen should be put to the paper a little tighter and finer to make sure that the work that's going to be provided is done in a manner that also maybe better reflects the cost structure that's a little lower on the side of that overall fee.
Okay. And with respect to 750, of course, the 750 planning efforts are looking at the waterways at a much broader scale. What this planning effort is intended to do is actually get down to the property-specific set of analyses and improvements that go along with actually identifying particular projects that can be funded and implemented as a result of the plan. So they're not duplicative. They're actually complementary efforts.
They really are, and that's why I feel like in many respects a lot of the work that you may have done is actually going to be somewhat provided as a result of some of the things that they're actually going to be doing, and I think together we'll be able to create a better product in the end. But realizing that, it just made me look at the different steps that were being provided and realizing that I know if I were bidding on a project like that, I don't think we'd be at the $200,000 range for something of this effort. Realizing
Okay.
that $165,000 was for the policy and design charrette process, so that seemed again so we were going a little high for that.
Okay. Well, we certainly can go back and work with your staff. We used as a guide the costs associated with the work we did in Palm Beach County, which was actually in the $228,000 range. Smaller geography, similar type of consulting expertise we would anticipate bringing in. Marine economists, the engineers that really understand things like bathymetry, dock construction, water taxi constraints, those types of things, to really inform the plan in a way that would be most effective. We certainly can, reduce or eliminate some of the work from those other consulting firms to bring the costs down. But that's the type of planning effort we had discussed at a staff level, and so we crafted a scope that's accordingly. So,
Madam Chair. Playing the devil's advocate, if you're successful at getting this board to accept the scope of services, and worst case scenario, if you get to Martin County and you're not as successful as you are here, where does that leave us in terms of the monetary obligation as well as the scope of services?
well, the scope anticipates the two entities, the MPO and the TPO, working together. We would go back to the drawing board with your staff. We have already presented to the Martin MPO actually back in December, and they gave us a unanimous recommendation to go forward. So I'm hopeful that that's an indicator that they continue to be as interested today as they were then. We haven't had any indication that they aren't. But certainly if Martin County was not to participate, we'd go back and try to lean the effort down to look just specifically at St. Lucie County. It would likely jeopardize some of the funding from the Find Board. One of the advantages the Find Board noted was the regional scale, the two-county scale of the effort. And they thought that was a good idea and a good efficiency because, of course, the boats don't know when they cross the county line. And so those improvements being tied together was something they thought was advantageous. we can certainly go back and try to, whittle it down some more if that's necessary. If, for example, the Martin Board did not want to participate.
Madam Chair. Dr. Delaney, today we had another I guess you'd say a long conversation at our Treasure Coast Council of Local Governments. We've been working on water quality issues and water issues for over 2 years with that group. And so the timing is pretty interesting because that is very high on not just Martin and St. Lucie, but also Indian River County, although they're not in our regional, they're not in this scope, about the water quality issues, what that does to the economic development, the issues of shoaling, a variety of different issues, and having had little input from several entities over the years, today we found we had input from St. John's Water Management District, South Florida Water Management District, and a letter from someone who was the designee working on the project from the governor's office. So the timing is pretty interesting to help pull this together, multi-county, to look at the big picture of things that have been a major concern and of major interest for multi-counties for many years.
Sure. Mine's going to be all over the map, so
Brace yourself.
you, as part of the scope of work, you talk about the shoreline construction, dock structures and things of that nature. I may have missed it, but is DEP and EPA a part of any of these discussions and or meetings?
They would be. In fact, that's in the beginning sessions. We would be pulling those agencies in to talk through where they are with respect to permitting and regulatory activities on the waterways, to understand kind of the direction of those agencies, if you will, and engage them in the process early on. So whatever recommendations come out, we would already have them as part of the dialogue so that we can steer away from things if they can't be permitted, or find a way to enable them to be if they become a strong enough interest from the folks that participate.
Okay, and as part of that too, Ms. Hensley talked about the water quality. We have the 10-Mile Creek reservoir that was constructed and has failed, and the Army Corps has yet to address that. I know it's a pretty broad picture here, but will this scope of work take that into account, because the C-44 in Martin County is being constructed currently, and that's also about water quality and tributaries to the lagoon. So is that going to be part of this?
Yes. Water quality is one of the pieces of the natural system that we would address as part of this. Identify all the ongoing water quality improvements, figure out what's working and what's not, and going forward, not only reflect those activities, but figure out how we can improve their efficiency. Communalizing the permitting, for example, is one of the ways we found in Palm Beach County that you can get more bang for the buck. When you actually line up the activities of multiple jurisdictions, for example, and get a common permit for a broader scale of activity, the engineering costs come down and the construction costs come down when you can line up the schedules. Dredging the inlets, another example of that. That was as an example of that type of efficiency improvement. So.
Along those lines, when I was in Washington a couple of years ago, speaking to the Army Corps, they raised the issue when we were trying to find money for dredging of the inlet and the area north of North Bridge by Little Jim, where it's shoaled extremely bad. They indicated that there were $5 billion at that time sitting in account for ports. It's a fee that is charged to all cargo above the cost of managing that cargo, and it's set aside. It was over $5 billion then, but it's being held aside to balance the budget. Are we going to be able to use the information here? Maybe each of the entities can take this information and argue that whether it's fined or whether it's the counties or the cities to break off that logjam, if you will, of dollars.
Right. That's really the advantage of doing this type of plan. Which is to kind of zoom out from a local government or single agency perspective and get to a high enough scale so that you can identify a multitude of improvements and become better positioned to draw down the federal funds. That was the rationale for Palm Beach County getting into this type of planning effort to begin with. And the same type of rationale we would suggest would hold true. Better if you can find a larger scale of improvements that you then go out and find a piece of funding that might be a very large piece of one, but it's not as big a piece when you have 8 or 10 projects that are stitched together in a plan that you can point to and show that it's a phase of implementation, but it's one of several phases. So that's the rationale behind this type of planning effort.
And as we have heard from some members of 750 who have chosen to back away from 750, they're concerned that we begin to create border wars, if you will, on funding. For instance, I talked about the 10 Mile Creek reservoir that was built and failed and has yet to be repaired. But our lovely partners to the south are able to achieve, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to get their new reservoir started, but they haven't completed the other one. So my concern is that how do we present this in a way that keeps everybody involved and knowing that we're all going to get a piece of the pie and we're all working for a common goal.
All right. Well, that's the challenge with assembling a plan, right? If each individual entity continues to go forward with their own set of projects, what we know is it's harder to get them funded because you're asking for a bigger piece of a single project, and there's some duplication which sometimes turns the agencies away. And instead, the rationale is to identify all of the different ongoing projects, the additional ones that we need, and we don't know what all of those are yet, but this education process, delving into what the agencies are trying to do would help identify that and then generate that fairly substantial list of things that are all the things that would ideally occur over, let's say, a 20-year horizon. And then there's some implementation challenges that arise going forward once those are identified, and that would be the role, for example, of a group like the TPO, is to figure out which are the higher priority ones that the TPO might participate in. Or if it's through the Council of Local Governments, these are the many pieces, and in this year, here are the 5 or 6 that we're going to try to fund. This would hopefully provide that platform for that discussion going forward, instead of the default, which is each individual entity planning each individual project and seeking funding each time, which creates the inefficiencies. Okay. So that's the rationale behind this type of planning effort at this scale.
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other discussions? Seeing none, can I have a motion? You want to approve this?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any
For
further
discussion, if the motion maker could include that that they would consider, that the staff would consider adding an additional public hearing or public comment with
Comments.
between Fort Pierce and Fort
Absolutely.
St.
I have that noted.
All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Item 8B, Transit Development Plan, major update.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the board, to present this item is Marcia Ladu, the TPO's Transit Program Manager. Marcia?
Thank you, Peter. One of the tasks in the Unified Planning Work Program is to provide technical and planning assistance to St. Lucie County and to community transit. And this includes support for their transit development plan. Now, the Transit Development Plan is the transit agency's guiding document for public bus service. It's required for the receipt of certain transit funds, and a major update is required every 5 years. The current Transit Development Plan, which expires in 2014, is a joint effort with Martin and St. Lucie County, and it's known as the Regional Transit Development Plan for the Port St. Lucie urbanized area. Now, this plan will expire in 2014, and both St. Lucie and Martin are in the process of doing the major update for the plan. Both St. Lucie and Martin County have expressed concerns, however, that this regional approach does not adequately address local needs. Instead, they support independent, separate transit development plans. That would be one transit development plan for St. Lucie and one for Martin, but with a shared regional component. And that's the approach that's outlined in the scope of services that's in your agenda packet. The scope was prepared by Tyndall Oliver and Associates, and this is one of the firms that's currently under contract with the TPO as a general planning consultant. The scope incorporates comments from St. Lucie County, from Community Transit, and from the Florida Department of Transportation. And some of the highlights in this major TDP, Transit Development Plan update for St. Lucie County, it will involve extensive public involvement. As I mentioned before, it will have a regional component, an evaluation of existing conditions, an estimate of the future demand for public bus service, short and long-range implementation plans, and a financial plan. And just to kind of walk through the schedule, the document is due to the Florida Department of Transportation on September 1st, 2014. We project that we can start the process in March. It will be about a year process, and that by midsummer we'll be able to finalize the document and incorporate all the comments from the various review agencies. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Madam Chair. I don't have any questions, but this might be the opportune time to bring up a conversation regarding a comprehensive coordinated transportation plan for St. Lucie County. Getting everybody who provides transportation together. Madam Chair, I'll probably bring it up to the local coordinating board. And actually looking at what we have, what we need, and how we can work together across barriers for greater efficiency and getting more people moved to where they need to be in a timely manner for less cost. As we have to do this plan anyway, then when we get to those conversations, maybe this would be the appropriate time.
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
Any further questions? Comments? Seeing none, can I have a motion for approval?
Motion approved.
I guess you're second, Commissioner Sadowski?
Sure.
All in favor?
Aye.
Just be aware, Commissioner Sadowski and Commissioner Johnson owe $20 each for the pot for being late.
Oh, now we're starting that here.
I got lost. Went a couple of circles around the building.
He got me lost.
Item C.
Yes, go on.
Item C, 2013 legislative priorities.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. And we do recognize Commissioner Johnson attending, and is attending in a informational advising capacity, because the county is at the full capacity for voting. But we appreciate this. This is actually very exciting to have such great representation, participation also from the Mayor of Fort Pierce, new elected Mayor of Fort Pierce. We look forward to continued participation at this level from all the jurisdictions, because it'll only make us stronger and better. With that, I'd like to propose the 2013 legislative priorities for the TPO. These are based on the recently adopted Metropolitan Planning Organization Advisory Council, the MPOAC, 2013 legislative priorities, and legislation proposed by State Representative Gail Harrell, and several local governments. Several of the TPO priorities, legislative priorities, pertain to transportation funding, including implementing recommendations from the MPOAC Transportation Revenue Study, which was presented to you in October of last year. This study evaluated new and innovative funding options to restore the purchasing power of the Florida transportation dollar. These recommendations from the study included expanding the Charter County and Regional Transportation System surtax to allow municipalities over 150,000 in population and all counties located within MPO areas to enact up to 1 cent local option surtax by referendum. Also, index the local option fuel taxes to the Consumer Price Index. Another recommendation is to redirect to the State Transportation Trust Fund those additional motor vehicle and title tag fees that were enacted by the 2009 legislature. Also increase the state fuel tax by 2 cents a gallon per year over the next 5 years. increase the local diesel fuel tax by 5 cents, and develop a plan to move Florida toward a mileage-based user fee in place of the traditional fuel tax. Now, in addition, one of the priorities is to restore funding for the TRIP program, from which Crosstown Parkway has been a beneficiary in the past. Another of the priorities is pertains to reducing distracted driving by regulating the use of electronic wireless communication devices while driving. Finally, the last legislative priority would be to is legislation being proposed by Representative Harrell and several local governments that would require the Florida Department of Transportation to adopt rules, which are not currently in place, for governing the use by local government entities of the FDOT's unused fiber optic communication networks for non-transportation purposes. So I look forward to any comments or suggestions, and staff recommends that the 2013 legislative priorities be adopted.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just as a point of information, Mr. Buchwald, I was on the phone with the governor's office last Friday, and I was a little bit disturbed by the information I was getting that in this year's budget, St. Lucie County is slated to get $68 million, of which $35 million was going to be provided for Crosstown Parkway. Have you been provided that information at any level from the state? It seems like a very low number. Yeah. It just seems like a very low number. And then as part of that, the remaining monies were largely all transportation projects in the county, and only $4,500 was for some extraneous provision, as how it was slated to me by the official from the state who spoke with me on Friday.
Madam Chair, members of the board, what I understood that to be was additional new funding for Crosstown Parkway. If you recall, at your December meeting, we were presented with the DOT a work program for the upcoming fiscal year that is for the next fiscal year. That includes programming for all of your priorities. So it was really a truly what I felt to be a fine work program, because it was funding in some manner all your priorities.
Which is why I was a little worried. That's why I wanted to have the conversation, because the way it was presented, it wasn't as though it was additional funding. It was that was all it was.
Well, that is, Madam Chair,
they took
members of the
money
board,
back.
that is the state funding. I mean,
Right.
sure, all of your priorities have various pots, various sources of funding, both federal and some local sources as well.
No, Peter,
So-
you're correct. It's an additional.
So, right,
It's
so
additional.
I consider that a step forward, and that's something, a recognition that St. Lucie hasn't gotten in the past, that this governor now is because of your efforts as a board and because of your progressiveness, that I think that is why some of that additional funding is now being coming your way.
Much better than what the way it was presented to me over the phone.
Okay, do we wish to adopt the 2013 legislative priorities?
Madam Chair, I'm going to be voting just out of, because I just don't agree with it. I'll be voting against what's in front of us, other than I agree with the point 2, 3, and 4, but the MOPAC's recommendation of the increases in all the taxes as a way to lead into the long-term plan that they've proposed, I'm not going to be supporting it this time, because I have not been given enough backup on that one.
Okay, duly noted.
I'm in agreement with that as well.
Move acceptance.
Second. Nice.
Madam Chair, for clarification, you want the number 1 to be deleted, so we'll just have 2, 3, and 4 as the legislative priorities? Again, these are...
That was, if number 1, which is basically a MOPAC recommendation, with all the increased tax revenues to be implemented, that part I'm not going to be supporting. Even though, so I'll be voting against it,
Right,
as
but
I
there's-
put on the record.
Because these begin and end with you. So
Okay, but
if
we
you-
only have 2 that, correct?
Okay.
That are against, the majority, but they're going to note, so we have to vote individually.
Right.
It's at the discretion of the board in terms
Okay.
of whether this is a draft. I can revise them at your discretion, and we can...
Madam Chair, I wasn't making a recommendation, a motion. I was just putting it on the
Like
record.
this.
So,
Okay, but we did have a motion and a second, correct?
Yes, I think so.
Yes, I did. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All against?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, there's 3 that,
4.
4?
Or
Okay.
We have,
So it's Commissioner Mowry, Mayor Hudson, Mayor Hutchinson, and who else? There's 1, 2,
And the
3.
Vice Mayor
Oh,
Oh,
Vice
Vice
Mayor
Mayor.
Bartz.
Good job, Mayor.
Does Mayor Hudson's vote, is she a voting member today? Okay. So there's 1, 2,
I did.
3, 4 against, and we had
We have 10, 8.
We had 11, so, yeah,
Carries.
so it carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board.
Number 9, discussion item, 9A, St. Lucie TPO redesignation.
Madam Chair and members of the board, the TPO received the correspondence dated January 11th, 2013, that is in your packet from the Florida Department of Transportation, in which FDOT requests that the St. Lucie TPO, the Indian River MPO, and the Martin MPO review and evaluate whether having multiple MPOs representing the shared urbanized areas is warranted. Now, this request is prompted by the results of the 2010 census, which illustrate the population growth that the Florida urbanized areas have experienced over time. The 2010 census also confirmed the continued pattern of the Florida urbanized areas growing together, especially along the coasts. And locally, the boundaries of the Port St. Lucie and Sebastian Vero Beach, South Florida Ridge urbanized areas, those 2 urbanized areas, have now become contiguous. And so FDOT indicates in the letter that because of the regional growth patterns, transportation systems need to be planned on a regional scale and effectively address regional transportation issues critical to supporting Florida's economic competitiveness. And accordingly, FDOT is requesting that the St. Lucie TPO, the Indian River MPO, and the Martin MPO review and evaluate whether having multiple MPOs representing these shared urbanized areas is the most effective way to plan transportation systems regionally. Now, it is determined that the existing MPOs should be consolidated. The local governments representing 75% of the affected population will need to adopt resolutions of support for the redesignation of the existing MPOs into a single MPO. Now, recent discussions regarding this and regarding mergers, consolidations, whatever you would like to call it, happened in December of 2009 when the St. Lucie TPO board unanimously supported exploring the potential for merging with the Martin MPO. In addition, invitations were extended in February to the Indian River MPO in Okeechobee County to participate in the discussions as well. The Indian River MPO subsequently declined the invitation, and Okeechobee County did not respond. And then later that month, in February of 2010, after a St. Lucie TPO Martin MPO joint meeting, the Martin MPO formally discontinued the discussion. After the 2000 census, and back in 2003, and several current board members, including our Madam Vice Chair Hutchinson, may recall, as she was TPO chair at the time, significant
Deja vu.
resources.
It's deja vu to me.
Significant resources at that time, she can attest to this, significant resources were expended by the TPO to justify that there should be 2 separate MPOs for the Port St. Lucie urbanized area. And this resulted in the current apportionment plan that was approved by then Governor Bush in 2004, and under which the TPO operates today. Now, direction to staff is now being requested from you in the drafting of a response to the Florida Department of Transportation request regarding the redesignation of the TPO, and the extent to which resources should be expended on exploring the consolidation of the 3 Treasure Coast MPOs, or on the contrary, the extent of resources that should be spent on substantiating that the size and complexity of the existing MPOs and the planning areas make designation of more than 1 MPO appropriate or inappropriate. So it is understood, though, at a minimum, regardless of what the board decides, the metropolitan area boundaries will need to be confirmed, and so will the board membership apportionment. Now, the TPO's planning area currently includes all of the county, and there have not been any issues with regards to board membership apportionments that have been identified. So the confirmation of these 2 items, that being the planning area, and that being how the composition of the board is now, seems to be very straightforward. So whatever direction the board decides to take, whether to explore consolidating with the other two Treasure Coast MPOs, or to substantiate that we should remain separate, is at the discretion, and that those activities need to be completed, or initially being requested by DOT to be completed by July 1st. So we look forward to your direction.
Madam Chair. Yes.
I'm sorry, but I've got to get out of this one right off the bat. Deja vu, been there, done this. And while I am a great one for believing that what was then is then and what is now, I must mention that I am sitting here as, I must assume, the past chair of the former MTRTO, which, to the best, and I've talked to you about this, Mr. Buchwald, to the best of my understanding, perhaps you have further information, I don't know, that just kind of went away because Martin County was not, I don't want to say wasn't participating, but they weren't participating. Whether that's because of their very different organization, I mean, to be very fair, particularly with their director, I'm not sure even what her title is down there. She's not a director down there. Ms. Beltran, she is, the MPO in Martin County is embedded in the county, and as such it functions very differently than we do. So the fact that they were not able to participate fully, despite the fact that the funding was coming from DOT at this point in time, which kind of boggles my mind, but I'm, you know, and I know this is all very disjointed, but I am very concerned that we are being asked to look at redesignation. The boundaries are as they are. The metropolitan area has been defined and accepted. We went through a very long process some years back, which required us to do a great deal of regional cooperation, which is fine and makes sense. I agree with that. But I really don't know that combination or merging is, in my mind, a possibility. We're looking at a transit study that's being broken apart because the entities seem to feel that their needs are different enough that they can't present something organized. How in the world are we going to approach any other form of transportation, if that being the case? I mean, we just accepted that earlier in this meeting. So I'm not sure where we're being asked to merge, combine, whatever the terminology would be.
Well, Madam Chair, members of the board, we're being asked at this point to evaluate, and that was the question, I guess, directions to what extent do you want to spend this organization's resources on either evaluating
None.
whether it should
No.
merge
Well,
or whether-
perhaps, yes, perhaps
And on the
I
other
wasn't
side-
clear enough. That was my evaluation, that I don't see how it's going to work, and I really don't see spending a great deal of time and resources. We had some pretty much, prior to your being here with us, I believe we had some pretty much knockdown, drag-out fights amongst the board members. I don't want to go there again.
Well,
Who won? I'm gathering nobody won.
Well, Madam Chair,
Well,
You got more.
It was like a 2-year battle.
yeah, Madam Chair, you know, some of us have been around a while, and it was more colorful than any of us anticipated it would be.
Polite word, yes.
Would that be fair? I would like to think that as Commissioner said, that was then, this is now. I'm not sure that things have changed enough that we have seen that there's a willingness from other partners to sit at a table and actually have a significant discussion about doing that. I understand at the MPOEC meeting, conversation was the regional issue needs to be it, and I don't disagree with that. Of course, I would prefer that St. Lucie County was the only one in control of our region. That would make me happy. But when it comes to regional projects, we may have to reach out and figure out how to do that. But as far as combining them, I think that would take a lot of staff time and a lot of conversation, and I'm not sure that it would produce the results for which the state is looking.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I would just suggest that, you know, there has been quite a change in leadership in the region over several elections. I would suggest that we direct the executive director to take the temperature of our would-be partners and see what, you know, if things have changed, if they would be more open to a conversation, dialogue, and participation in full, and then bring it back to us next month and then make our final decision. I just think that there's been quite a you know, change in leadership in the region, and you know, the attitudes may have changed, but I don't know that we have that information today. I know you all have been through the history, and certainly there were some I wouldn't say attitudes, but there were some characters that you dealt with.
Chair?
I was,
Madam Chair, can I With all due respect, Commissioner.
Oh, here it comes.
No, and please do not take this personally, but if this is starting right here, right now, you can imagine what it was like 10 times worse 10 years ago. It wasn't the leadership. It was the makeup of the people who live within, and the needs differences and the wants differences between the counties. That's what drove the split, if you will, or the decision not to merge as DOT under their guidelines. We actually formed our own guidelines of a merger, which it took us a year to get the state to acknowledge. A lot of trips to Tallahassee, a lot of discussion amongst the two leaderships, Martin County and St. Lucie County, that got us to that point. With that being said, those same needs, those same wants have not changed. Leadership may have, but those have not. And that was the driving force. From a regional standpoint, I happen to be very proud that since that time, there has been a very huge effort on both St. Lucie County and Martin County working together on any project that is regional, especially on the transportation. No different than, in a prime example, St. Lucie County years ago passed a transit tax to ensure that the commuter transit was going. Martin County refused to. That was a difference that really kind of stood out there that kept us separated. So,
just as food for thought, I know in 2010 they actually sent a letter to Secretary Wolf, and they reiterated those exact same points. The fact that the two counties have a very different growth philosophy, and as a result they had no interest as an MPO to do any merger. But I'm wondering, is there something that we ought to at least consider, maybe where the two remain separate in that sense, but we do something similar to Miami-Dade and do a UZA or something, so that way we have something where we're the two entities, but then on some more global regional areas, if it would be beneficial to both entities, we would be able to have some type of joint participation discussion on particular aspects.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Marwi, of course, we already do some regional planning efforts as a result of the current apportionment agreement, which is that we do a regional long-range plan.
But think about a UZA specifically or something. So that
for the UZA. For the UZA. So the extent, and I think that's what DOT will be looking for, and the governor, in terms of if we remain separate, what are those regional and cooperation activities that we'll be doing? What are those regional products? But I also don't want this board has demonstrated through its letters that are in your packet, through the discussions that initiate back in late 2009, early 2010, and from what I understand, even back after the 2000 census, St. Lucie has always been progressive in leading the efforts to look at what's a better way to work together, what's a better way to streamline, optimize operations, to meet the needs of the region. I certainly don't want those progressive to get attitudes to get overshadowed by spending resource on substantiating why we should remain separate. So perhaps maybe a recommendation could be to remain neutral in this whole discussion, meaning that, unless this board would be opposed if someone was to reach out their hand to us. It seems like we've reached out our hand to our neighbors and said, would you like to discuss this? What if would you be opposed if the neighbors reached out to us and said, let's discuss this? But either way, I don't know if it's in the best interest of yours to spend amount of resources on either side, because your efforts are clearly on display in terms of, and the results of them are only coming to fruition even more so with the Crosstown Parkway getting funded, with the port master plan under development, with the waterway master plan, with the transit development plan. Your progressive efforts are paying off, and I certainly wouldn't want those progressive efforts to be detracted by using resources to on either side of this question.
Mr. Buchwald, I would think that the door is always open for conversations, and we should always be having conversations. I do think that I would be reluctant to suggest that you and your staff spent a great deal of time and money and effort in trying to reconnect again. But I think that the conversation needs to be ongoing. I know you talk to them all the time anyway. I think that once the entities recognize, as other counties have, the progressive nature of what we're trying to do in St. Lucie County. Actually, just so you know, I did ask if there was a way that we could have connectivity without having to work with the counties next to us, if we could skip a county or two and work with somebody. That didn't go over very well. But I think, but I do think the opportunity still lies out there, although however remote, that the conversation needs to continue.
Madam Chair, I agree that I would be very reluctant. I'm assuming, Mr. Buchwald, that Martin County has not considered this issue as yet?
Well, Madam Chair, members of the board, we're considering it before them because our schedule is before them, so it's before them. But just based on staff discussions, staff has, again, referenced the letter that's in your packet as to what their position is with regards to merger, that they're not interested in exploring a merger. So unless that changes, that they're indicating that that is their current stance. So that's why I proposed, I would recommend that staff draft a letter for your consideration response at your next meeting that advocates for, that supports a neutral position.
Madam Chair, I'm just one of several, but we've had this discussion, and I can appreciate to some degree our directors' attitude and disposition toward making it a reality. But bottom line is that we sit here as an agency that is competing for dollars that are handed down by the state, and our interests are totally different. The complexity of the constituents, when you compare the different counties with each other, are totally different. And bottom line, we're seeking one pot of gold. And I think that if we even place on the table that this is something that we want to ascertain, that perhaps we're moving in the wrong direction, at least from my perspective. Anyway, they come at us this time with saying that we're representing the same urbanized area. True enough, we are. But again, our interests are, in my opinion, are totally different as far as this board is concerned. Withstanding what we just did and how we voted with 9A and 9B, hopefully that will work out. I'm leery about it, but we did it in terms of trying to come together on one accord. But I just don't feel that from a regional standpoint this is something that, and I remember the same conversation before, we want to entertain. So thank you.
Well, Madam Chair, again, to confirm, is it the pleasure of the board then that a letter be drafted in response that, and from what I heard two different things, should the letter indicate in some manner that that door is always open, but we're not, that significant resources are not going to be expended
Is that the pleasure?
in either regard? Is that an appropriate perspective that the letter should take at this time? Again, it will be brought to you in draft form.
I think it also shows
April meeting.
It also shows the state and other funding entities that we are open to, regionalization of some sort. That we understand that dollars are tight and make us look like the good guys in the mix, if you will. But like you said, the neutral position, I think, is something that we can move forward with without basically upsetting our neighbors if they should ever choose to come back. And again, from the perspective of funding, it's obvious that there's no use in spending additional dollars at this time.
Madam Chair, perhaps the letter could reiterate, I'm sure they have the documentation, but the letter could reiterate what we did agree to do in a regional fashion the last time around. For instance, we agreed to have joint meetings at regular intervals. We agreed to have members sharing the meetings back and forth. There were, and I don't recall what all of the points were, but there were things we agreed to do kind of in return for being allowed to remain separate. And perhaps those things could be reiterated as part of the letter to indicate our willingness to continue to to work with and collaborate where we can, but the combination just, I'm sorry, that one, I just can't see how it would work. In the same meeting where we just felt the need to set up a separate transit document, where we're talking about recombining, it makes no sense to me at all.
Okay, so, Madam Chair, to summarize, the first draft of the letter will confirm that the metropolitan planning area boundaries, that's the entirety of the county, shall remain the same. The board membership apportionment shall remain the same. We'll reconfirm those other activities, the regional as part of the regional activities that we'll be doing. We'll confirm those that we agreed to in the past as subsequent to the 2000 census. And the overall flavor of the letter shall be of a neutral position.
I'll make a motion to that effect.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Item 10, informational data, 10A, 2013, we did this. No. Okay. AC Weekend Institution for Elected Officials. I
Thank
guess
you.
it's the cards right here.
Right, Madam Chair. Just again, the dates and locations for the Weekend Institute of 2013 are in your packet and are on the cards. Several current board members have attended in the past and indicated to be of tremendous value, including Chairwoman Fiala and Councilwoman Martin. And the TPO will pay for the cost of the Institute and will reimburse the travel expenses. Just please let me know if you wish to attend.
Just a note on this. When I went, it was very informational, and it helped me out a lot to understand. So I recommend if you haven't gone, please go.
Madam Chair, as do I. It was great.
Yeah,
And
it
remember, the Jeopardy was real fun, Mayor.
Oh, quiet, because you won. Okay, 11 FDOT comments.
Good afternoon, Lois Bush, FDOT, Commissioner Hutchinson. It's been 10 years, I think.
Yeah, and I think you
And
were on the
same-
other side of that dais.
Yes.
Yes.
She was trying to be neutral.
But in any event, I just wanted to let you know the district is drafting a letter now to your TPO and the Martin and Indian River County MPOs to convene a meeting to get the consultative process described in Secretary Prasad's letter going. So we want to have a conversation with the three MPOs together, and just to alert you that letter will be coming soon to initiate that process.
Thank you. Item 12, recommendations, comments by members?
Madam Chair, could I just go back to your comment? Did I misread something, or is it, maybe I didn't, but I thought I just heard you say that is the request being asked for us to merge not only Martin and St. Lucie, but also Indian River this time?
Yes,
not just the
because you
Martin
have
and St. Lucie?
contiguous
Right.
urbanized areas.
Okay. Enough said.
Going back to item 12.
If I may, Madam Chair. I had the privilege of going to the MPOAC meeting. It was, I would say, much livelier than some of the previous MPOAC meetings I've been to. Some fairly good dialogue. My real concern and continuous gripe is that what they tend to do is always get up and give reports and talk at you and do not seek your input on some of the issues that come forward. But by and large, they got input anyway. So I think that there's been some, of course, there's always a lot of side discussions about some different things. And my real feeling was that there are several counties who are willing to move past the old silo issues from years ago. And you can see different groups talking to each other about how they can work in concert, even if they're not contiguous. And I think that's a very positive sign. So it was well worth the trip, and it was actually fairly entertaining.
With you there, it has to be.
Item 13, TPO staff comments.
No, thank you, Madam Chair. No comments.
Okay, our next meeting is a regular scheduled meeting on Wednesday, April 3rd, 2012, at 13 at 2 p.m.
Madam
Any further
Chair.
questions?
Yes. May I make a comment?
And he's speaking.
And I'm speaking. First of all, I want to say I respect each elected official that's sitting here today. You know, I sat here as a spectator watching because I don't have a vote today, number one. And number two, as I'm sitting here and I'm seeing everybody that I respect and appreciate the fact that you've been elected and you did what you needed to do to get here and have been here from that point forth, I can appreciate the fact that this is the most powerful board in the county. And I can say that because of the people on this board. But with that said, you know, one of the things that I respectfully so push for camaraderie in the county. This is camaraderie at its highest when you got Commissioner Hutchison, you got Councilwoman Martin, you got Mayor Fiala, Mayor Hudson, you know, and they can come in agreement on different issues and subjects and things that we've been faced with. But moving forward, we know transportation is the talk of the day. That's where the money's coming through. That's where the opportunities coming through that we're faced with our county. And, you know, in spite of what they're doing in Martin, in spite of what they're doing in Okeechobee, in spite of what they're doing in the river, the bottom line, we got to take care of home first. And I can appreciate that. And I want to tell each and every one of you, I respect your ability. Let's keep this camaraderie going. Let's do what's right for St. Lucie County. And if any other county want to jump on the ship, there's always a seat waiting for them if they want to abide by the rules that we set for ourselves and where we're going. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? See none? Meeting adjourned.